welcome back to Woodruff Woods. Hey, I'm Darren, and today we're not going to be talking about firewood. We're going to talk about business. So, those of you that have been watching the channel for a long time, you know two things about me. You know, one, that I work in business in a large corporation. And secondly, you know I drink Bud Light. I wanted to talk about the Bud Light controversy that's going on, and certainly around the internet and social media, it's a big deal. So I thought I'd take a few minutes, talk to you, give you my perspective on what Bud Light did and what they should do. For many years, this has been my beer of choice. I'm one of those people that I don't usually just drink a beer or two. When I decide to drink beer, it's 5 or 6. And light beer tends to work out better for me for that. So, choice has been Bud Light. Not sure why, just liked it. And definitely was one of the iconic brands of America. You know, I remember even as a kid waiting to see the Budweiser commercial during a Super Bowl. Or, you know, around the holidays, they would do a holiday commercial with the Clydesdales and the wagon. And I've been lucky enough to see the Clydesdales a couple of times in my life. One part of my career, actually maybe the biggest part of my career, I worked for Emerson Electric, which is headquartered in St. Louis. So I even knew people over at Anheuser-Busch, and you know, had a lot of respect for the company. As a matter of fact, August Busch was on our board of directors, and you know, so there was a close tie to Emerson Electric with Anheuser-Busch. But anyway, about 2 weeks ago, Anheuser-Busch did a promotion through a YouTuber. Actually, it was a TikToker. I should just say a social media personality. So they hired Dylan Mulvaney, who is a TikToker, who is a transgender, a man transitioning to a woman. I don't know what part of the process that person's in. And frankly, until this Bud Light thing came up, I had no idea who this person was. But, you know, they had sent out a case of beer or a few cans or whatever they did, much like people send me products to show on my channel. And one of the cans had the image of this individual on it. I don't know if it was the can that upset everyone or just the fact that the person's transgender. I'd like to think that's not it, but it probably is. If there's one thing about a free market, the consumer will tell a company when they don't like something about them. I mean, going back to, you know, Tylenol, any of you that are old enough to remember the Tylenol scare and just how people wouldn't buy Tylenol for a long time. These things do stick around for a while. And I think it's important, you know, Anheuser-Busch gets on this pretty quickly. A couple days prior to that, their VP of marketing, who seems to be pretty new in her job, had made some comments about, you know, it's a declining brand and that she wanted to change the image of the company because it was a bit fratty and had a lot of out-of-touch humor. And when she said that, I thought, boy, that's pretty arrogant. Budweiser, and it's Anheuser-Busch brands, I should say, have some of the most iconic commercials of all time. Things that we remember 20, 30 years later. The frogs, Spuds MacKenzie, the horses doing a bow to the towers after 9/11. Just really moving, memorable commercials. Going back to the vice president of marketing, she did say that there was a declining brand, so I looked into that, and sure enough, it is a declining brand. Their sales have been going down for probably about the past 5 or 6 years. Putting things in perspective here, Bud Light outsells its competing brands, Coors and Miller Lite. I read one estimate 25 to 1. So every beer that is sold by Miller Lite, 25 Bud Lights are sold. So even if they have a declining brand, meaning they're selling less light beer than they did last year, they're not losing market share. So, you know, again, I think that most of the time, if you really felt that you were losing because someone else was maybe hitting that demographic that you're looking for, you would do an ad like this. You would shock the market. That's not the case here. Everyone's coming down equally with the exception of Michelob Ultra. Michelob Ultra hits a different market. they're hitting the carb conscious market because it's a very low carb beer, low calorie beer. So they're hitting someone that's health conscious. I saw that their market cap has gone down $6 billion with a B dollars. And boy, that's a hard hit to take. And for those that may not know what market cap is, that's really just how your company is valued. So they've lost $6 billion in perceived value. And you know, that's going to hurt. That's going to hurt their financials. Some people are calling for the termination of the vice president of marketing. I think if I were in that company right now, that's something I'd be recommending. This was not a well-coordinated marketing campaign, advertising campaign. She has the responsibility for that. She has severely damaged their brand, and I do think she probably needs to go. You know, you need someone in there that's going to think about this type of backlash before it takes place. You know, I never like to see someone lose their job, but maybe she'd be better marketing somewhere else. They didn't think about who their customers were, who gave them that market share that makes them such a dominant player in the market for light beer. And typically, from what I've read, they are people over 40, people that are typically blue collar. They're not craft beer drinkers, they're not wine drinkers, they are light beer drinkers. You know, they didn't take into consideration that much of this is in rural areas. Much of that population is Christian and active Christians. So, you know, I really don't think they thought about what they were doing. And when you think about that population, if you think about the 300+ million people in America, and you're outselling your competitor 25-1, I'm not sure why you risk that. There's another way to get at it. And so I decided to look, you know, what is the percentage of transgenders in America? And it's a fraction of a percent. They're all over the place with an actual number. I'm not sure anyone really knows. But, you know, you took a fraction of a percent of the population, which is a controversial one. Whether you want to, you know, I'm not saying anything bad. You know, in my mind, you do what you do, and if it doesn't affect me, I don't care. But, you know, you really took a chance with this, and you got burned. One thing Bud Light could have done is had their president apologize. He sent out this message, it was crafted very carefully, to say, you know, we didn't want to weigh into, you know, a controversial topic that divides people. But you did, and you had to know that. So I don't believe that, and I don't think a lot of their customers believe that. And then he went on to say, you know, we want to bring people together over a beer. You know what? That's a great idea. And, you know, bringing people together is a great thing. And I look at every American as just that, an American. I understand some of this and how sensitive it is, but, you know, he's not going back to his customer base and saying, I'm sorry, we had a misstep. We didn't anticipate this kind of backlash. We try to be inclusive of everyone, and you know, maybe the way we did this wasn't exactly in the taste that we should have done it, because other beer companies have done this and supported the LGBT community and didn't get a backlash like this. So you know, I just don't think he's done enough. And then, to add insult to injury, they released an ad. And in some ways, I think it was smart, but I think the wound was too fresh to do it. They put out an ad with a Clydesdale running through all these American scenes: New York City, Grand Canyon, St. Louis, you know, I even think on a country road somewhere. And it just showed this Clydesdale running, and it talks about the American experience and the American spirit. And that's what Budweiser was. You know, they were America's beer, you know, the king of beers. And now they've really risked their reputation. And only time will tell to see if this so-called boycott lasts. Typically boycotts don't. And I see some people are very upset that people would boycott over this. But frankly, I get upset when anybody boycotts, like boycotting Eskimo pies and Aunt Jemima. And honestly, I see that as, you know, they're creating jobs for people, and especially, you know, Aunt Jemima. I mean, the woman, Aunt Jemima, was the one who created that brand, so she was obviously comfortable with it. It was just a bunch of people that had their nose in places that maybe they shouldn't and were uncomfortable with it. When I think about all these companies out there doing this stuff, you know, you got to do this. I'm not saying you shouldn't be socially aware and socially responsible, but you also have to be responsible to your customer, because if there is no Bud Light and there is no company, you have no influence whatsoever. So, you know, I don't think Bud Light will go out of business over this. I think they'll take a pretty good hit here for a short period of time and they'll be back. But it's sad, and it's sad that someone didn't think this out a little bit more, and they probably could have approached this a little differently. I certainly think what they should do is come out with something to bring their existing customers back and acknowledge that they didn't recognize that they would be so offended. And in all this time where we were concerned about people being offended, that means everyone. And if you're only inclusive to certain groups, you're exclusive by definition. And unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people understand that. Anheuser-Busch has some options here, right? They need to make the apology. They need to fire the VP of marketing. And they need to go back to some of their traditional advertising to win back their customer base. And maybe ask their customers to help them be a more inclusive company and an inclusive brand. Maybe you ask your customers to get to know someone who's different from you. I joined this firewood community, I don't know what it's been now, 2 years ago. And I've met people, many very similar to me, and many very different. And I'm just thrilled. I meet people from all around the country, even different countries, you know, around the world. And they do things differently than me. They tell me, you know, hey, maybe you should try this. And I learn things from them. And that's what happens when we get to know people that are different from us. We get to learn about who they are and how they do things and how they perceive things. And that's important. And for many of you, you know, I work in HR and I deal in this topic a fair amount. And there is nothing wrong with diversity and inclusion. I know I strive for us to have an environment where we do hire the best candidate, regardless of what they look like or what religion they have or what their sexual preferences are. Because I want the best person, because that's going to make my company the best that it can be. And then I also want those people that are hired to be included in what we're doing. They need to be a part of what it is we enjoy in that company. And we have great camaraderie and great teams. And I see these people being embraced. And they're embraced because they're really good at what they do. And people want to work with them. And unfortunately, I think that Bud Light had a misstep here. They didn't explain their position enough that their consumers would understand what they're trying to do. It came off as they were trying to cram an ideal down their throat. I think they were trying to say, we want to expand. We want the younger people to enjoy a Bud Light. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with that message. I think they just went at it the wrong way. And they have an opportunity right now to go back to their customers and say, hey, you know what? We'll acknowledge that we may have taken the wrong step. But we're going to ask for something. We're going to ask our consumers to share a Bud Light with someone different. And I'll be the first one to do that. I tell you, as I've traveled the globe, I've met people from all over the place, different financial backgrounds, different colors, different religions, different whatever. And I always learned something from those people. And at the end of the day, they're just people. If you're going to boycott Bud Light, God bless you. I don't know what I'm going to do. I haven't decided. I know I'm going to drink this case. I know I'm not going to shoot it. I'm not going to run it over with my truck. And actually, oddly enough, I was watching Chris in the Woodyard, and he was cutting up Bud Light, but that wasn't the reason. He was using a chainsaw and an axe and a splitter, and it was really kind of comical what he was doing. So I'll tell you, check that out. But that's going to be it for Woodruff Woods. I know a little bit of a heavy topic, but I thought, you know what? A lot of us in this community enjoy a good, nice cold beer, and I'm sure we're seeing this all over the news, and I thought I'd give you my perspective on it. So that's all for Woodruff Woods, and I'll catch you on the next one.